Study Healing, Episode 4, The Emotion Code and Releasing Trapped Emotions with Dr. Bradley Nelson. You talk about a young lady that came to one of your seminars. Her name was Jessica.
Right.
And she stood up and she was a volunteer. So initially, she said she was feeling fine, that she wasn't even feeling, she's feeling good that day. And
Right.
you tested her for trapped emotions. And she had the emotion, I believe, of feeling unsupported, right? And then...
I think it was this the diaper situation?
Yes, it's a hint to the past. Yes, so unsupported. And you released that emotion from her. And then you found out from her mom, you did the muscle testing, you found out that this was from a very early age.
Right.
And later you
First year of her life, actually.
First year of her life, okay. Yeah, so you asked your mom.
Yeah, first
Tell me
I
about
asked
that, yeah.
First I asked her. So if you can imagine, I'm in front of this room full of people.
Right.
And I just asked for a volunteer, and this young woman comes up. I think she's about 20 or 21 years old or so.
Yeah.
And I just had her hold out her arm, and then I started asking questions. And how we get information from the subconscious mind, that internal computer system, is the arm will stay strong for yes, if the answer is yes, coming from the subconscious, or it'll go weak for no, right? So I asked if she had a trapped emotion, and the answer came back yes. And so I started asking, well, when did it happen? Between 10 and 20, no, earlier. Went back to age 1. So I said, do you have any idea what this might be about? And she said no. And I didn't think she would.
Right.
She was a baby.
Right.
So, and I had figured out the emotion was either, I can't remember exactly what it was. I guess it was unsupported. And I happened to look out at the audience at that moment, and her mom was out there, and she was just as white as a ghost.
Right.
And or she looked like she'd seen a ghost.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, do you have any idea what this might be about? And she said, she was really embarrassed, but she said she thought she did. She said that when her daughter was that age, she used to use cloth diapers, and one day she accidentally pinned her daughter to her diaper.
Yeah.
And so then I tested the daughter, and she didn't know about it until she changed her the next time.
The mom said the baby, she'd cried and cried, she didn't know why, and then she went to change her and saw that she securely had her
Can you
pinned.
imagine how horrified you'd be if you were the mother and you find that out? I mean, you'd just be so horrified. Well, so anyway, that was it. I tested, and her subconscious mind said, yeah, that's exactly what this was from.
Right.
So then I just released the trapped emotion, which just takes a few swipes, down the governing meridian, down the back. And she went back and sat down. And I didn't think much about it, but then about 10 days later, I get an email from this girl's mother. And she said that her daughter had had a problem with it was her right hip and her right knee, that she'd had trouble with for quite a number of years.
She was 12, yeah.
Yeah, and it had been gradually getting worse over time, and it was affecting the way that she was walking and everything, but she just lived with it. So when she came up and I asked her if she had any problems, she didn't. No, she said no, she was fine.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
People kind of minimize, and they live with things, right, that they just think are normal. But her mom said that from the moment that emotional energy was released, the pain was gone, and she was walking normally, and she was feeling this new sense of lightness, right?
I love it.
And she said that she waited 10 days to email me about it because she wanted to make sure it wasn't some kind of a fluke.
Right. Yeah.
So, but that's the beauty of the emotion code, is you can find things, you see, that otherwise there's no way to be able to find. I mean, think about her. I mean, what therapist would be able to find something like that?
It's so difficult. And for you to even be able to, just through your intelligence, be able to go back and say it's probably from, I don't know, you just wouldn't do it without actually asking the body. You'd be like, it's probably from something from my childhood. I mean, it probably is. But actually identifying what it really is, and then putting awareness on that, shining light on that, that's such a key thing. And then allowing it to be processed is amazing.
It's a beautiful thing, and it's so fast. See, we can find things that otherwise you can't find. And that especially comes into play with emotions like that were picked up when you were a child. Things, maybe you were abused, or maybe your parents are going through a divorce, or who knows what. Most of that stuff we just forget, or we maybe block it out. But the subconscious mind remembers everything. And it even remembers things that you would think impossible. Like, for example, at the moment of conception, we inherit emotional energy oftentimes from parents. I think we all do.
It's such an interesting idea, and it makes a lot of sense. So initially, sometimes things that feel like they're in the ethereal realm, they're discounted. And you know, whatever idea you put out is going to be discounted by and criticized by someone.
Sure.
You know, but especially when ideas are simplistic or seem to be simplistic, some people won't gravitate to them because they think that complexity makes them intelligent, you know?
Right. And well, that's just the ego.
Yeah, it's just the ego.
It's actually simple.
Well, we have genetic predispositions. We have inherited diseases. We have all those things. Why wouldn't we have inherited belief systems and emotions?
Well, right.
Makes a lot of sense.
Science is finding this out now. They're doing studies with animals, and they're finding out that even the most primitive, lower animals will somehow pass down memories. They don't know how this happens yet, but we do. I mean, it's just emotional energy.
You see it all the time. Yeah.
Right. But up to 14 generations, a lower animal will pass down that memory. Okay. So if you think about it, you know, if you're let's imagine that you're an elk and you're on some area of the mountain and you're almost killed by a pack of wolves, but you survive somehow, and then you maybe father an offspring, you know, a little elk, an elklet, or whatever you'd call it. What happens is, for many generations down the line, somehow that traumatic memory will be shared, so that the elk that 100 years from now, they may still avoid that area of the mountain, and they won't know why, but or maybe they will know why, but deep in their subconscious mind is the memory of what happened to that ancestor. And that's the same exact thing that happens to us. There was a book written recently about the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, and they found that these grandchildren of people who survived the Holocaust and went on to have children have different DNA than normal people, and their blood markers for aging are greatly accelerated, and they're much more susceptible to disease, and their stress levels, their baseline stress levels, are dramatically higher than normal people. Why? Because of what their grandparents went through. See?
Right.
So it's a fascinating thing.
That is a fascinating thing. Yeah. My students I just finished teaching a class that we have at Zion Massage College called Optimal Health, and all the students take this class in their program. And they read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, as one of the required texts for it. Great book. And even Viktor Frankl talks about watching people come out of the Holocaust and the conclusions that they formed and the way that they engaged with others. And some people came out really having, everyone that came out of that had trauma, of course, you know.
Sure.
But some people came out with a perspective about wanting to do good in the world, wanting to really impact other lives in a way that brings more compassion and awareness, you know, to our interactions. And other people came out feeling bitter, you know. Yep. And this is human nature. All humans do this.
Yep.
And so those things, it makes sense that they would be passed down. I had an experience where, and what I'm trying to say is that when bitterness, fear, those types of darker emotions are passed down, that we have a greater chance of doing harm both to ourselves and others in our lives.
Yeah, we totally agree.
And we're completely unaware of it. So treating that, even, you know, just treating it on a daily basis is so important. And this work makes that possible. So I had an experience recently, and it was such a profound experience for me. I couldn't believe that I did this, but I did. And I was, you know, able to see it, grateful that I saw it in myself. But when I went through a divorce, I was dating for a while, like actively dating. I had this kind of like view of dating that it was going to be, I would go on dates, you know, and I would decide would there be a second date. And
so
dating, you know, this thing I thought I missed out on. And so I like created this thing that probably isn't even real except for, you know, dating. And so in the way I thought it, my rules for it, you know. So I'm going on these dates and I would date people, and I went on a date with this one guy. We walked around this pond, and then at the end of the date, he texted me and asked if I wanted to go out again. And I told him, because I thought that honesty was a really good approach, you know. I told him, you know, I really didn't feel like a ton of chemistry. I think you're amazing, but I just don't think it would be a great idea for us to go out again. And so he sent me like this barrage of just really kind of harsh texts, you know, things in the vein of like, I could totally outrun your fat ass. He spelled it wrong. Just kidding. No, but he just like, he wouldn't let up for like 6 months of just sending these mean texts until finally I just actually like blocked the number. Yeah. But anyway, so fast forward to like 8-9 years later, you know, and I was sitting in this conference. It was actually Tony Robbins seminar. You know Tony Robbins.
Sure, yeah.
So anyway, so I'm sitting in this seminar. I go to one of the breakout sessions, and this guy comes up and sits by me, and I'd been to another training with him. He was getting married at the other training, and he annoyed me, you know. I was bugged by his presence, and I didn't know why. In general, I really love all people, but I was just bugged. But for some reason, even knowing what I do, I didn't question this. And I put up this energy that he told me he was going through a divorce, so I like judged him even more, you know, and for all these reasons that were not the reason that I was really having that, you know. And so anyway, so we sit there, and at one point I even like made some rude little comment to him. There was a woman speaking, and she was like 15 years older than him, and she said she was single, and I said, she's single, you're single. Like, I was really bratty, you know. And so after that, I just kind of had to like question myself, why was I asking this way, acting this way? And I realized after doing a little work, he reminded me, my brain recognized that he was not even exactly the same, like resembled this guy I went on one date with, and he was like paying for this guy's, you know, what he had done. And so in the least awkward way that I could think of, I contacted this man. You know, we'd stayed in touch, not the one on the date, but the one from the seminar, because we see each other at multiple seminars. And apologized for my behavior, apologized for even that right now that he had to be in a conversation with me about this, and thank you for even listening to this, because even this is weird, you know. But it was trapped emotions, and it caused viciousness, you know.
They can do that.
All my girlfriends would have backed me up in treating him that way, sending that signal, I am not available to date you. He didn't even want to date me, you know. I mean, like, probably. So interesting, but I think we all are capable of that, and that really led me to question and actually do work with any type of heightened emotion I have or reaction that I have. You know, we hear these things, you know, like I think Abraham Lincoln said something like, this is a complete paraphrase. So it was something along the lines of, like, if he felt dislike for another man, that this was a reason to actually get to know them and to explore that, you know. And
I haven't heard that.
So with our emotions, that is such a key thing. So both physical illnesses, but also in some of the way we're acting out as if we're living in a dream. You know, cruelty to each other because of trapped emotions.
It's so true.
Have you heard any stories like that? What have you seen with?
Oh gosh, yes. Well, you know,
experiencing.
See, our emotional baggage. If you think about this, these bodies that we have, these bodies are just pure energy. Even though to us they seem solid, and you know, you can take your hand and it seems solid, right? And your body is solid. But on the other hand, it's also just pure energy and almost entirely empty space. And in fact, some physicists recently figured out that if you could remove all the empty space from everyone's body on Earth, you could put all, I think it was 5.8 billion people in the world, you could put all of us into a little box the size of a sugar cube, right? Because the body's just energy. And so we're just really starting to learn that about ourselves. But trapped emotions, the reason why they cause so many problems is because they have this dual nature. And what is a trapped emotion? Well, when you're feeling an intense emotion, maybe you're being bullied, or maybe you're going through a breakup, or whatever it might be, you're feeling an emotion, and if that emotion is powerful enough, then some of that emotion can be left behind, because the process of going through that emotional experience, sometimes we don't really complete it. So this can happen for a couple different reasons. Let's say, for example, that you learn that anger is really bad. Well, anger can actually be good in some situations, right? And it can be useful. But let's say that anytime anger starts coming up for you, you bury it and stuff it and refuse to feel it. That can create a trapped emotion, okay? Because that emotion then is unexpressed, you see. But there's another way that we develop trapped emotions is when the emotion is just really powerful and the emotional energy becomes trapped in the body. Your whole being can take on this vibration, and every emotion is a different vibration. They're all unique, from each other, right? And so a trapped emotion is literally a ball of emotional energy from about the size of a softball to the size of a baseball, right around that size. And these will lodge in the body wherever. They can lodge anywhere in the body. And wherever they lodge, they will tend to distort the normal energy field of the body. Okay, they have this distorting effect. Now, when you have distortion going on in some area of the body, in some area of the energy body, that area of the body is not going to be able to function as optimally as it should, right? All the chemical reactions taking place within that sphere of energy are distorted a little bit. The blood flow, the lymph flow, the flow of chi energy, the acupuncture energy through that area, they're all going to be distorted a little bit. And so what ends up happening, well, if you distort the physical body itself long enough, you're going to have some kind of symptoms, right?
Right.
A great example of this that I've told so many times, but it's such a great example. This guy came to me many years ago for really severe low back pain. It was about a 9 on a 0 to 10 scale. So I tested him and asked some questions, and his subconscious mind brought back that it was an emotion of anger, and it was from 20 years before. And when I arrived at that, he immediately piped up and said he knew exactly what it was about. It was a work situation and so on. He was really upset. So I released the trapped emotion, and the pain that he'd been in for weeks and weeks went from a 9 to a 0 just instantly, right? Yeah. And he couldn't believe it and kept bending over and walking around and exclaiming. It was just like a miracle to him, and I was grateful that it worked so well. A couple of days later, he came back in and he said, my back is still fine, but he said, I had another problem that I didn't tell you about when I came in here. And he said, for as long as I can remember, I've basically been what you'd call a rageaholic. Yeah. He said, I'm always yelling at my wife and my kids. I got to watch the road rage. I've been to anger management several times. Hasn't really helped me. But he said, since you released that trapped emotion of anger for me, I don't feel it anymore, right? I feel kind of peaceful and relaxed. And he said, how did that work? And at the time I said, well, I really don't know. But think about this, okay? This guy had this literally a ball of anger in his back, and it was distorting those tissues, the bones.
Yeah.
Over 20 years' time, it finally got so bad, brought him into my office, right?
Yeah.
He was like, when you get to a 9, I mean, you're seeing somebody for surgery, right?
Right.
But it was really just because of this emotional energy from 20 years before. So the other thing is that he was a rageaholic. Why? Well, here's why. Because when a situation would come along in his life where he might tend to feel this emotion of anger, he would slide right into that feeling, right into that frequency so easily because part of his body was already feeling it. That's the weird thing about these is that part of his body, I think, was really feeling that emotion 24/7.
That resonance of anger could touch on the resonance of that was in his body of anger and activate it and send it through.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. So if you think about it, there are 60 emotions on the chart that we use. There's resentment and depression and all the negative emotions that we feel. And so we all have emotional baggage. What's it doing to us? Well, think about this guy. He was a rageaholic. He had to go to anger management. Well, not anymore after that one emotion was released.
Yeah.
But they also, they don't just affect us physically. They affect us emotionally, mentally, but they also are a big underlying cause of diseases. In fact, every single disease process, I've been doing this now for about 32 years, every single disease process, every named disease that I worked on many, many years, they all had an emotional component. And sometimes that was the only component that they had, was just the emotional component. So if you think about it, I mean, if you're trying to be healthy and you're trying to have an optimally functioning immune system and you're trying to survive in this world, with viruses and weird things, and what do you need to do? Well,
manage your emotions
Yeah. You need to get rid of your emotional baggage.
The most important thing.
Yeah. And one of the fascinating things about this, the way that I look at this is, these bodies of ours they're just pure energy, and they should be free of dark energies, right? Well, when you have emotional baggage, each trapped emotion is like a little cloud of darkness in the body. And as you start to remove those, you will often feel lighter, right? And eventually you get rid of enough of those, and then you begin to realize suddenly that you're turning into the person that you were supposed to be.
Right.
Not this person that you thought you were. And it's so interesting. I had it's very common for people to say that they feel lighter when that emotional baggage is, some of that is removed. Right?
Right.
And one of my favorite stories is from one of our practitioners. She went over to a woman's house and was working on her, and worked on her son, who I think was 10. And after she worked on him, he got up and he bolted out of the room. And he came back a minute or so later with this really puzzled look on his face, and his mom said, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And he said, "Well, I weighed myself this morning, and I know I've got to be at least 10 pounds lighter, but I weigh the same." So on the scale, he was the same.
Cute.
Isn't that cute?
Because it really is. There's a saying in Chinese medicine, I'm going to massacre the pronunciation, but it's butong zitong tong zi butong, which means that when there's stuck energy, that there's pain, and when there's a free flow of energy, there's no pain.
Right.
And so with that type of work, we're always working with energy first. Of course we are,
Sure.
Because in Chinese medicine, you have that energy is very yang. It's the movement, and so all structure follows it. So if you can move that energy and move that resistance, everything will flow. You won't have pain,
Right.
You'll have, they do connect together, and
totally.
and you'll have good circulation. You won't have ischemic muscles anymore. You will not have edema. You will have all of that free flow, and with it also comes a free flow of your emotions, And so I love that idea, because it seems to be true that those blockages, once freed,
right,
you have health, you have optimal health.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's so fascinating now that we're living in this age where all of this knowledge is starting to permeate through really all of society. And what's fascinating with the emotion code is what I have seen since it came out, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
The first edition of it came out then, and it's really been interesting for me to see the shift that was going on at the time that it came out, and where that shift has gone now, and how so many people are finding out that they can do this, that it's easy.
It's easy. You've changed so many people's lives with this book, and the method is really simple. You've made it simple. A lot of it you've even just given away to people. It's online, and the truth is, though, that there was a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of really putting yourself in a place where you could receive those epiphanies and those downloads, so that you could share it with people. Tell me a little bit about your journey with that, and tell me a little bit about how you ended up putting together this system, because you have a very clear system that's made it so easy for all of us to follow.
Right.
How did that happen?
Well,
I mean, I know it's going to be it's not going to be just linear. Those questions are always hard, because there's so many things that go into this type of stuff.
Well, it's really a lifetime, really.
The best you can.
Yeah, it's my lifetime. Well, I'll tell you, it goes back to when I was 7 years old, really. That was the beginning of it for me, because what happened was I was really sick with the measles, and my parents had made a bed upstairs for me on a couch in the living room so I could be near their bedroom. And I had overheard them talking, and I knew the plan. The plan was I was being admitted to the hospital the next day and going into something called an oxygen tent, because I was really sick. So my parents came into the room this night. Everybody else had gone to bed. And I remember this, although It was many years ago, but in my mind, it could have happened yesterday. And they came into the room, and my mom said to my dad, she said, honey, will you kneel down with me and say a prayer so that our boy will be able to get well? Mm-hmm. So they did. So in the middle of this prayer that my dad is offering, this short prayer, something shifted. There was this shift, started at the top of my head, and it went whoosh through my body, the soles of my feet, and I was instantly made completely well. Now, to be really sick and feeling really awful with this terrible viral thing mm-hmm. one moment, to be completely, totally, vibrantly, perfectly healthy in the next instant. Yeah.
You're like the Monty Python guy. I'm not dead. Like I'm okay.
But I was totally healed.
Yeah.
So they, yeah, right. So I waited till my dad was done, which didn't take long. And when he was done, I said, "I'm better. I'm better. Heavenly Father healed me." And they said, "That's fine, honey. Tomorrow you're going to the oxygen tank." Right. The next day proved it. So I filed that away, because what I learned from that was that there is definitely a higher power.
Yeah, definitely.
And if we ask for help, wow.
Of course there is.
It can happen.
It's amazing. It's amazing that we've had to feel that way in our lives about, okay, you guys, there's definitely a higher power,
Yeah.
And because there is, and we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Exactly.
And so it's only been through propaganda, and it's been through people's egos that we've had any type of misconception about that.
Yeah.
And that has stunted many of our healing. And by the way, even the process of dying is part of our whole, having a healthy life.
Exactly.
So a lot of misconceptions. And I love that this work is helping to clear some of those up and helping people to literally be in touch with their inner selves, which is where reality really exists.
Well, right, exactly. And so that's kind of the process. I mean, that was the beginning for me. Then there were a lot of things that happened, in between there. Mm-hmm. But basically when I got into practice, I figured, okay, God's gotten me into this. And of course, God goes by different names, but if you believe in a higher power, that's where I was at. I thought, okay, that higher power got me into this. Now I need some help, and I know that I can ask for help. And so I just created this habit, and it was a totally private, totally personal habit for all the years that I was in practice, mm-hmm. where before I would go to work on somebody, I would just take a moment and ask God to help me with that person. And nobody ever knew that I was asking for help. It was just a momentary pause,
mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you something. I learned for an absolute fact that God or source energy or a higher power, however you want to refer to it,
mm-hmm.
Is aware of what we're doing all the time. Because there were cases where people would come in to see me and I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know how to approach their problem, didn't know how to deal with it, with what was going on with them. And I would offer this silent prayer for help, just that momentary thing. And in response, I would sometimes just get this flood of information, just this avalanche of data and understanding that would help me to know. Now, that happened, I can count the times that happened on one hand, mm-hmm. right?
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time, when you're asking for help, the answers come, but they're so subtle and they're so silent that oftentimes we miss them. Those answers come, but they'll come in the form of a little thought, or maybe an idea that you think is your own idea,
mm-hmm.
or maybe an impression. It's just those simple little things that come, but you have to pay attention to those, because that's how the answers usually come.
Your ego thinks is your own idea, but your awareness knows is actually from source.
Yeah, right. And the whole ego thing, my ego is not in this. I mean, I believe that this is the purpose of my life, is to bring this healing work into the world. And all the experiences that I've had in my life and all the spiritual experiences and everything have helped me, have brought me to this point, because this needs to come into the world. But my ego's not involved in this.
I know that. I've known you for a long time, and I have so much love and respect for you, and the way you live your life, your beautiful family, and the way I've seen you handle different things. It's amazing. Like, you definitely embody, what you teach. So.
Well, I learned early on. I learned early on that if your ego gets involved in if you're trying to serve and love other people, and the ego gets involved, then it really throws a wrench into everything.
Mm-hmm.
because then, you can't forgive. And instead of wanting things to be as simple as possible, the ego wants things to be as complex as possible.
Right. And then no one will even understand it, but you'll be able to feel super intelligent.
Yeah.
It's great.
My wife told me, she was reading a book to me a few years ago about, it was a great book about that someone wrote about healing and energy work and so on. And she was reading the foreword to me, and the foreword was about how difficult this is and how complex it is and how energy work is, it takes years and decades of practice. And
only specific people can do it.
Yes. And she shut the book and she said, well, not anymore.
I love it.
Right?
I love Jean's amazing too.
Yeah.
She's like very practical and she's straightforward. I love,
Well, so.
Yeah, that's well said. It's well said.
So, I'll tell you something. When I was writing this book and Jean was helping me and doing some editing, we would pray every time we would go to work on the book. And our prayer was that this would be simple so that anyone could understand it. And truly, children read the book and start and are getting great results, by the way, around the world.
Well, the important thing is that it actually works.
Exactly.
And it really does. And I've had personal experiences with it. You also, at a seminar back in, you came out and spoke at my school to some of our clients and some of the students. And it was, I think, back in February or early March.
I think so.
And my friend was there at the time, Rhonda. She had a cough. She'd had this cough for about 5 or 6 years.
Oh, yeah. And, I think I remember her.
So anyway, so it made a lot of people nervous because it was, early, like late February 2020, right? Okay. And so, so I reassured everyone that Rhonda, this was part of Rhonda. This was the sound of Rhonda's happiness. She coughs. But you did some work with her. And so I want to report back to you some feedback, because it's always good to get this feedback as things play out.
Right.
Her cough went away. She ended up getting very sick with something that was a hidden underlying condition. She recovered from that, and she's really strong now.
Cool.
But she also overcame a series of very personal but emotional things that she was dealing with. It gave her some strength to take action on some things, and she definitely credits that moment that was so quick and such a simple thing as the catalyst for her healing.
And oftentimes that's what we need, is we need a catalyst. We need something that's going to tip us into that healing mode,
Yeah.
Another thing, a few minutes ago, you were talking about Viktor Frankl, and I was reading lately about Corrie ten Boom, who was also she was in Holland, and she was a watchmaker, and her family was rescuing Jews, and they had this interesting house that was made out of 2 houses, and so facilitated that. Yeah. They had a lot of people that they helped and rescued, but eventually she was turned in and ended up in Ravensbrück, the concentration camp, where her sister actually was pretty severely beaten and eventually died. And so she was one of those people that decided she was going to take this experience from the concentration camps and use it for good. And so she started traveling and actually had gone back to Germany to teach about forgiveness to these people. And she said that back in those days, she said that the German people would come in, nobody would say a word, everybody would get up when she was done speaking, no one asked her any questions, everyone would get up and just silently file out, because of course there was this tremendous cloud of guilt and so on, terrible thing. But anyway, she was at this meeting one day and she was speaking about forgiveness and so on. And then all of a sudden she locked eyes with a man at the back of the room who was a guard at Ravensbrück. And she just kind of froze in her tracks, and he came up to her and he said, "I'm so grateful that that you're speaking about this." And he said, I have found Christ, and I've tried to forgive everybody. And but he said, he looked her in the eyes and he said, "Can you forgive me?" And she just stood there for what to her I think felt like kind of an eternity, because she didn't know what to do. But she put her arm out because she thought, I can do that much. And then it was like this electrical charge flowed into her, and she was able to forgive him, with all of her heart. And so if you think about the darkness that's inside of us, these trapped emotions, part of what they do is they interfere with our ability to forgive. And see, to really have peace in life, we have to forgive those that have wronged us. And sometimes we have to forgive ourselves, because we do stupid things too, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the hardest person of all to forgive, is yourself.
Right.
But I've seen so many cases where emotional baggage is removed about that person that hurt you or whatever it is, and rather than just becoming indifferent to what happened to you, which some people think is equivalent to forgiveness, but it is not. To truly forgive brings peace to you. And I think it was Lewis Smedes that said, forgiveness is like setting the prisoner free, only to find out that the prisoner was you.
Right. Right. Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's part of this too.
Yeah. No, I feel that. So it's interesting because you talk about the Holocaust and Viktor Frankl and people that have experienced extreme trauma in life. I went to India with my daughter. You know this story.
Right.
So she was a victim of a crime, and she had some recovery from that and some healing work we needed to do. And I ended up taking her to India, to this ashram. And I was naive young mom. And now I definitely know that India is a pretty extreme place to take your child that is actually suffering from some emotional trauma, you know? And it ended up really being a catalyst for healing and growth, but it's not something that you'd be like, oh, this is the solution for everyone, you know?
Right.
And I say that tongue in cheek, and it almost is like has large amounts of dark humor in it, you know?
Sure.
And because you know some of the stories out of, India. But one thing that I observed when I was there was that many of the children that were there, you see children that have, they have like a middle and upper middle class and upper class in India, but there's still a caste system. And you also see that there are many children that have been abandoned, and you see it right there, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you also see a lot of people that are impoverished and that are truly suffering on a level that we've never felt in this country, you know, most of us. And then you also see that in the midst of that there's still a lot of happiness and joy. And I had this epiphany as I was there, because I was there for my daughter's recovery and to help her, that these little children, these people that were experiencing things like that they did not have the luxury of things like acting out, showing that they were feeling emotional trauma. It was at a much deeper level, you know. You also see that sometimes with things like racism or places where people are truly, in Nepal, I saw that recently. I have a good friend of mine that wrote to me. She works in a guest house that I go to with my students. And she wrote to me and said that right now her family is actually starving. And I know her well, believe her, sent her some money, but because of the caste system, she just loses her job, and she just loses everything, and doesn't even question it, that that's, you know, wrong, or that something should be done. And so, you know, when someone's on that level, when they're not even saying that they should be treated better, you know, that's when you see that they don't even have the luxury of, you know, rising to that level yet. So you've got your cup from Operation Underground Railroad, organization we both love and both support. And you were telling me about some work that is it's just in the works that you were interested in doing with the emotion code. Tell me about some of that.
Right.
What's going on?
Well,
helping people that are on that level. You know?
Yes, exactly. What we're trying to do, we're working with Operation Underground Railroad and another organization in Virginia that does the same kind of rescues. And what we're hoping to create here soon is an avenue for our practitioners around the world to work with these kids that have been rescued, to remove their emotional baggage, to remove the emotional baggage, especially around their hearts, that's blocking them from, you know, that will block them and interfere with their ability to really give and receive love for the rest of their life. And so we have some exciting things happening there. And we have about between 6,500 and 7,000 people who have gone through certification in the emotion code. So they're practitioners, and that's in about 80 countries around the world. And we've done some informal surveying of them, and the vast majority of them are willing to help. And what we're hoping to do is kind of set up sort of like an energetic adoption sort of a program where where each practitioner can maybe just take a child and then work with that child until they feel like, you know, they've done as much as they can do, and then maybe they can sort of energetically adopt another child, and we're just going to keep this going. And it's not it doesn't have anything to do with funding or anything. It's just, we want to help these kids, because when they're trafficked and they go through all this horrific stuff, then they've got all this emotional baggage that is going to warp and distort and diminish the rest of their life. Yeah. And so, and that's, you know, even if they get the best possible therapy, I can't tell you how many times I personally have had people where patients who would say to me, I can't believe that's showing up. I thought I dealt with all that. I went to therapy for that, and, you know, for years. But see,
I told you I can't believe my act of cruelty towards that poor guy who was just being nice to me and was nice enough to sit down next to me. Those were all kind things that he did.
That's what trapped emotions do.
Emotions, right?
Yeah. So if you think about that, and you multiply that experience that you had, you know, to an infinite degree, then what happens to these kids that have been so horribly abused? What kind of life can they have? Well, through sheer effort of their own will, they may be able to create a good life for themselves, and hopefully most of them will, but we can facilitate that and make that much easier if we can get access to these kids, and it can be done remotely. That's the beautiful thing about it. Most of our practitioners work remotely. Well, they probably all work remotely, but many of them have a practice where they only work remotely, and a lot of them work with people in other countries that they may never actually even meet in person yet, whose lives they may very well change. And so that's what we're looking at with this, is it doesn't have to be live and in person. People don't need to travel. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. And I've said many, many times, when you do the emotion code and you're working with somebody that you care about, maybe they're in another country or on the other side of the planet or something, and you make an immediate dramatic change for them just by releasing some emotional baggage. In that moment, your life changes, and you realize, you know, what you're capable of, and how powerful and how simple this is.
Yeah, I agree. So I have a student, so I've seen this a few times, but I have a student that was raised in foster care. And it's really interesting because at one of the events, it was actually in our optimal health class, we do a cooking class, and I let some of the dishes stay in the sink, you know, and I had her, like, people will be nice and they'll offer to wash the dishes and help and stuff, but this time I could tell that this was like, if those dishes don't get washed, you know, I'm not going to be able to, like, I cannot emotionally handle it, you know, and I could see this response from her, like, I can't emotionally handle it. And then she even said, like, I was, you know, remind me, I was raised in foster care, and, like, didn't even go on with that, but, and I was raised in foster care, and these dishes have to be done, or I'm going to, like, you know, I'm going to, like, implode. And so I challenged her to just kind of sit with that emotion, but I'm definitely going to do some emotion code and suggest it, because, you know, that really it helps with all those things. It's great to do dishes, but not to have intensity that's completely hurting your body if it doesn't get done, you know. And many of our desires, drives, things like that, they do come from things that we've hardwired together. So how often how complex is it, and how often do you actually see that wiring just completely disintegrate so that that person is free to do the dishes with ease if they would like to, but not be driven like the puppet masters behind them, making them, you know, do everything? How often do you see that wiring change, or is there some time that goes behind it? Because those are long-standing habits. Our emotions and habits, once you sever the emotion, can those habits just go away?
They can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they can,
Yeah.
and I've seen that happen many, many times. It depends on the person. It depends on what they've been through. What you're doing when you're releasing the trapped emotion is you're taking the electrical charge out of that experience, in a sense. It's another way to think about it. And so oftentimes, people that were abused or that went through something horrific, when you remove the emotional baggage, you're not taking away the memory of what happened.
Right.
So they remember what happened, but they'll say, gee, now I can think about it, and it doesn't bother me. Perfect example is a woman who came to me from back east, and we were working with her, and on one of her sessions we found she had a trapped emotion of resentment, and we needed to know more about it, so I traced it back. It happened when she was in high school. And she said, I know what that's about. And I said, oh, well, okay. She said it was about this cheerleader that she just resented. And she said, she's in her, I think in her mid-40s at this point. She says, it's so funny because I've been out of high school for so long, but whenever I think of high school, it inevitably, I end up thinking of that girl, and I can just feel the resentment just welling up inside of me. I thought, oh, that's such a great example of what trapped emotions do to us, right? After all those years. So I released the trapped emotion of resentment, and she came back a couple days later, and she said, she said, last night, I was talking with a friend of mine, and that girl's name came up in conversation. She said, for the first time since high school, I felt nothing.
That's amazing.
Right? So, but there are times too, though, that that having some kind of therapy can also be a beautiful adjunct to this work, so that you're not only getting rid of the electrical charge, but you're also kind of relearning new ways of thinking about things and so on.
How to replace, because you do. I mean, it is healthy to have some wiring, these habits. This is how we know how to drive a car. This is how we actually learn and get data from each other, like social data, so that we learn propriety and we learn how to engage with others.
And a lot of people will, when you remove the emotional baggage, a lot of people will just kind of naturally rewire, but sometimes it can speed it up with a little bit of therapy or some focused, conscious type work, like what Tony Robbins teaches, for example, right?
Great work, yeah, and massage therapy helps, and so many different healing traditions are adjuncts.
So many things help. I was thinking of a great example of this. I think I lost it. Anyway,
of adjunct therapy that can help.
No, it was something else.
Tony Robbins brings in some aspects of your work.
Oh, I know what it was.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Well, okay, so
you go first.
Okay, sorry. All right, I'll go first. So there was a number of years ago, there was an event that we did.
Okay, cool.
And we had about 500 or 600 people there, and there was a man named Enrique who got up in front of the room, and he told everybody this story. He said he'd been overweight for a long time. He weighed about 360 some pounds, and he looked great at the event. He looked like he weighed about 180 pounds or so. Yeah. He said he had lost about 180 pounds in the prior 12 months. So everyone is all ears, and here's what he did. When he would have an urge to eat that whole pan of brownies, or to have second helpings of whatever, he would stop and be conscious enough to stop and tune in and ask his body, test himself, ask his own subconscious mind, okay, is there a trapped emotion that's making me want to do this, that's driving this behavior?
That's amazing.
He would release the trapped emotion. That's all he did. That's all he did. He didn't change. He wasn't on a diet. He didn't change anything else. That's all he did. And in 1 year, he lost 180 pounds.
Wow.
Think about that. So, so that's another subtle way, that our trapped emotions, they can drive our emotional eating, of course, like in his case. They're doing that, to all of us. So.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I love that. That would definitely work.
And you were mentioning Tony.
Oh, yeah, no. So Tony Robbins brings in a variety of things into his seminars, and then some things that he's created, his epiphanies from it over the years. And such an outstanding man and such an outstanding program that he offers. But he brings in the work of Byron Katie. He brings in Ho'oponopono. He brings elements of your work.
Right.
It talks about like plant-based eating and alkaline diet. So many things that are helpful, and the importance of touch and massage. A lot of those events, they're doing them virtually now for the time being.
Right.
But they involved a lot of like connection and touch and community. You know.
Yeah.
And so important, and that feeling of bringing that back so that we can have safety, we can differentiate between what's appropriate and inappropriate touch, not just shut down so that we're safe forever, but then we're actually really hurting ourselves instead of being safe, you know, by that over caution,
right?
You know, that doesn't allow us to have any quality of life. So I love it, and this is such an important piece in that body of work. So
Tony wrote a great foreword for our book.
He did. I know. Yeah. I loved reading that. And you guys went out and saw Tony Robbins. You and Jean went out and saw Tony Robbins' Sage.
Yeah, we did.
Tell me about that.
Yeah.
That's
well, what happened was, it was a few years ago now, probably about 3 years ago, and we were in some business meetings in Salt Lake and got a call from our publicist that Tony was trying to get a hold of us. And I thought, okay, who is this? Right. Yeah. This is a joke.
But I'm not surprised at all, though.
Yeah. So they flew us out, and we've been to their home quite a number of times, and have worked on all of them, and are great friends with them, and we just think the world of them, and think that they're on an interesting sort of kind of a parallel mission in a sense, you know, with what we're doing, and so it was interesting for my wife and I to connect with Sage and Tony, and they're we're all trying to make the world a better place and trying to help people to achieve really what their true potential is, and that's what his work has been all along. And what was really interesting and fun was I was able to share, when the first time we went out there, we're sitting in the living room talking to Tony and Sage, and I was able to tell them, 30 years ago, my wife and I were just getting started, and we didn't have any money, and we were sitting up late one night, and we saw this infomercial by this guy named Tony Robbins.
That's so cool.
Right?
Yeah.
And we scraped together $99, I think it was, and we bought the program. And we did it religiously, right? It was a 30-day thing. We did it. We did the whole thing, and it changed our lives.
You got the result.
Yeah. 2 months later, we were at that point, we were broke and kind of nowhere. Within 60 days, we were in our own practice and in our own home, a few miles from the ocean, without having to put any money down or anything. It was the most amazing thing. So it was really fun for him to hear that
I love
our
that.
lives had crossed that way all those years before.
Do you know what else I love about that? So I love that your paths crossed, and I love it's amazing the outreach that one man that Tony Robbins has had on so many people's lives. You actually just went to his birthday party too, his 60th birthday party, which is amazing. But another good friend of mine, Sean Reyes, he's our AG right now for Utah, but he actually spent time with Tony Robbins with Operation Underground Railroad. So not only does Tony Robbins' organization donate to Operation Underground Railroad to stop human trafficking, but I've heard some crazy stories about some on-the-ground work that he's done.
Oh, yeah,
he's done
that's right. Well, he went to Haiti.
Actively, I know.
Yeah.
He went to Haiti, was on that sailboat, had a whole sting operation planned, risked his life with the local police in Haiti because they didn't know who were the criminals and who were actually the people that were participating in the sting operation.
They had Tony made up because they
It'd be so hard to hide. He's
6'7", and so they had him sitting down on this yacht where this sting happened, and they had a big scar on his face and a beard, so you couldn't recognize him, but he looked pretty scary.
That would be a very scary look, with the size of him. And,
but he's an amazing guy.
Some really great work that he's done. So you have some trainings coming up, right? You have some events coming up. Tell me about those.
Yeah, we do.
And then I also want to hear about the app that you have, because right now that's a great way for people to be able to connect with you and to be able to do this work and actually go in depth, because you have practitioner trainings as well.
We do.
Tell me all about what you guys offer.
Well, so we have a certification pathway that it starts with level 1 certification, and that's the emotion code. And so the way that works is it's $897. It's a 6-month program that you can do as fast as you want. The record, I think, is about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So you...
As a dedicated person, you probably really got the result, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
that's amazing.
Some people are just really gung-ho and want to get through it. Most people will do it in about half of the 6 months.
Okay.
But anyway, what you do is you watch videos, you take quizzes, you take a final exam, and you learn all about how to do it, and then you start working with people. And you have to work with a certain number of people and with a certain number of animals, because this works with animals as well.
Yeah.
And we want everybody to have that experience, because if you find 4 animals that are having some kind of behavioral or physical issue and you release emotional baggage, you're probably going to hit three of them right out of the park, right? We want people to have that experience.
Right.
So anyway, when you're all done, you're keeping track of all that online, right? And when you're done, the computer will tell you can submit, and then you click submit, and then everything is gone over by your student advisor, et cetera, and then you get a certificate, and then you can use the emotion code and do what our other practitioners are doing all over the world.
That's great.
So that's level 1.
Okay.
And then level 2 certification involves what we call the body code. And the body code is this software. This is the latest iteration of it, but when I was in practice...
I love this program. It's great.
Yeah. This app is actually called the Discover Healing app. It has the emotion code in it. And what happened was, when I was in practice, I learned that the subconscious mind of each person, first of all, everybody has a subconscious mind, which is really just this incredible computer system within each person. And the subconscious mind knows with a perfect understanding what's wrong with you, right? It knows if you've got misalignments. It knows if you've got deficiencies of vitamins or minerals or whatever. It knows if you've got emotional baggage and what that baggage is doing to you. It knows all about all of them, when they were created and who was involved and everything. Right. It knows if you've got any kind of an infection going on, viral, bacterial, fungal, mold, whatever. It knows all of that with a perfect understanding. And so when I was in practice, I learned how to tap into the subconscious mind and ask questions. That's where the emotion code came from. Well, a lot of the problems that people have are just because of emotional baggage, but sometimes it goes deeper. Sometimes there are other things going on. Sometimes there's toxicity, or you name it. So what I found was, and when I was in practice, I used to be a computer programmer before I went into chiropractic, right? I took this deviation for a while. I thought I was going to do that for the rest of my life. But when I was in practice, I always had a computer, and as I was finding imbalances that the subconscious mind was telling me about, I was categorizing them and tracking them and creating this system. And so what it looks like is you've got 6 different options here. And what you do is you simply ask the subconscious mind, where the imbalance is, and then it will take you to wherever it might take you.
So you're muscle testing yourself.
You're muscle testing yourself or other people, and it can take you to, you never know where it's going to take you. For example, in circuits and systems, there's a whole area called Disconnections, and this has to do with the
That's a great app.
The connection between the spirit and the physical body, see? Because if you go to a funeral, you look at the person that's dead in a casket and you realize something's missing. Well, it's the spirit that's missing.
Right.
Spirit lives on.
Yeah.
And that's really the intelligence that is what we're living in right now, right? But
you immediately see the difference in that person. You immediately see it's recognizable that spirit is gone.
Right.
It does not look like they're asleep. It is a completely different feeling and look.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. Well, so with just this one part, there are some interesting things. For example, sometimes the spirit is actually gotten knocked out of the body a little bit, and that you learn how to fix that. Sometimes the spirit and the physical body they're in there, but they're not quite talking, and so you can fix that too. Sometimes people will actually have a broken heart, and so we call it a spirit break, where the spiritual counterpart of the physical heart is actually broken. So when people say, gee, that broke my heart, they're probably right. So we teach how to fix that. Another one here has to do with pregnancy. And so what we find is that sometimes there are disconnections causing morning sickness. There's stuff like this in here that you don't find anywhere else, because I learned this. My wife was really sick 20 years ago. We have a daughter who's 20, who's actually, she's going to the Skin Institute. And she's in the master's program now. But anyway, when my wife was pregnant with her, she was really sick with morning sickness and was begging me to help her. And so I just said this prayer. I said, well, Father in heaven, if there's a better way to do this, help me to know, because the stuff that we use now doesn't really work. Right? And so, boom, I got this answer. And the answer was, it's all about connection between the mother's brain and the baby. And so that was it. And so I thought, oh, it's a connection thing. So then I worked on my wife, and we were able to figure out some disconnections and fix them, and boom, the morning sickness was gone.
That's great.
I was so excited. You know,
that's great.
There's a lot of stuff in here like that.
Yeah,
that was
really
kind of deviating, but
no, that's great.
You know, there's pathogens in here, like you can work with the energy of pathogens, misalignments of any kind of tissue. I mean, it goes all the way down to the individual bones.
That's
and
really
you can,
detailed.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in here. So this is really kind of my life's work. It's
can
very
you get on
encyclopedic.
App stores, things like that?
Yeah, it's available. It's called the Discover Healing app.
Discover Healing app.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's available on the App Store and so on.
Perfect. And then you said you had some sort of you have a webinar coming up?
I've got a couple things that are coming up.
You also told me that you did something with Gaia recently, right?
Yeah, I was at Gaia recently, in where are they at? In Boulder, up in Denver area. Anyway, I did an interview with Regina Merida.
Okay. Yeah.
About the body code, and so that's coming out soon. I think it might come out this month. It's October, so I think it might come out this month.
When it comes out, we'll put the link in.
Put the link in there,
description.
yeah. And then I also did a show about 2 years ago for a company called PSI Basel, in Switzerland. And they do something every year called the Flow Summit. And a couple of years ago, I was over there, did the Flow Summit. And then Hay House got a hold of that. And so that's going to be coming out on Hay House soon. And I should know what it's going to be called, but it might be called the Flow Summit. I don't know.
Okay, cool.
Anyway.
Yeah, we'll put links to everything.
Okay.
Well, I really appreciate you coming today, and I really have so much respect for the work you do. And you've changed so many people's lives with this. You've probably your reach is greater than you even know. You know.
Could be. Well, we're trying to reach the whole world as fast as we can. So.
Well, and then the idea of muscle testing. There are a lot of people that probably are practicing elements of what you've taught, and they come from this without even knowing where it's coming from. So
I hope
hopefully they will also find the source of this and be able to read the entire book, utilize the programs, all the resources you've created for people. Thank you for doing all that.
Well, you're so welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Rebecca. We love you too, and we're so proud of you and all the great work that you've done and all the lives you're changing.
Thanks.
So
appreciate your support.
Parallel tracks.
Yeah.
For information on becoming a licensed massage therapist, visit zmc.edu. For information on continuing your education in massage therapy and bodywork, visit studyhealing.com. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe.